oh, you're old, you're decrepit, you're past it. If I don't talk about this, then there's going to be other people suffering in silence like I do. Yikes. There's not much in the bank, you know.
Financial regrets. Do you have any?
It's the one thing that we spent most money on. To pay my mortgage, I had to take on a second job.
I don't know if you're aware, but that was actually the best read story on the Irish Independent that day.
So at the time, it was a really scary thing for me to do because media tends to be a bit, ageist when it comes to women.
What are the biggest money drains that could be avoided?
I only ever bought homes. It's been a total waste of money. The things that I love most in the world actually don't cost a penny.
Stop.
I actually get goose pimples every time I tell that story.
Hi, I'm Katie Byrne and welcome to Money Talks, a lifestyle podcast focused on our relationship with money and how it impacts our lives. Today, I am joined by broadcaster and entrepreneur Lorraine Keane. Thank you so much for coming in, Lorraine.
Thanks, Katie. Lovely to be here.
Good. So we're gonna get into it. We have some questions, but I was very eager to get you on because you did an interview with my colleague Gabrielle Monaghan.
That's right.
And you spoke about buying your first house when you were only 20.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you're aware, but that was actually the best read story on the Irish Independent that day.
Wow.
Yeah. So people were super interested in it, and I think it was because Gabrielle interviews a lot of people in their 20s and their 30s these days. And what we're hearing, the kind of general narrative is people are kind of coming to terms with the fact that they may never own a home. So
there were different times
exactly
when I was 20.
Totally different times.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know more about that. So when are we going back to? It's kind of like late 90s, noughties?
Yeah.
So completely different times.
Completely different times. And even though there was a recession at the time, and interest rates were 12%. So, mortgage repayments were a lot higher.
Sure.
It was just easier to buy a house. And I had to pay my mortgage, I had to take on a second job. So I worked full-time in a road watch at the time. And that was Monday to Friday. And I was on £7,000 a year. Wow. So that wasn't going to cover my mortgage. Yeah. So I worked in the AA rescue centre at the weekends. Okay. Because then I could obviously get a second salary. But if you worked after midnight in the rescue centre, you got double time. Now, working after midnight in a 5-storey old Georgian building on Suffolk Street as a very young, kind of late teens into my early 20s woman was petrifying because I was in there on my own from midnight until the morning shift person came in at 7 a.m. But I was getting double time. So I used to do that every second weekend. And that's how I was able to pay for my mortgage. So yes, house prices were definitely more affordable, more reasonable. Interest rates were higher.
Yes.
I had to work very hard to be able to pay my mortgage. But like my daughter is almost 22, Katie, and I can't see her buying a house or apartment in Ireland anytime soon.
Yeah.
So something has got to change because they're not getting a chance to do what I was able to do at that age.
Yes. Going back to that period in Irish life, did it feel like there were more opportunities? Did it feel like people of your age group then could get on the property ladder, or were you an outlier?
It was a lot easier than it is now. I was the first of my gang of pals to buy a house. So it was still quite young. But I had actually put in my CAO form, I wanted to do law or architecture. Didn't get the points for either. So decided to do a 1-year course in broadcasting and journalism because it was something that I was always interested in, but didn't really see it as a career. I thought I should go for the 4 or 5 year degree or whatever. So when I didn't get the points, I thought, well, I may as well do this year course and see if I like it. And then obviously got the job in a road watch at the end of it. So I was in the workplace from a very young age, whereas a lot of my friends did do that 4 or 5 year degree course. So from that point of view, I suppose I had income. I had a disposable income, but even though it was a small salary, as I said, I had to double job it to be able to pay for the mortgage. But yeah, it wasn't, 20-year-olds weren't really buying houses then, but at least the market itself wasn't overpriced like it is now.
Yeah. You must have had one or both parents who kind of pushed you along and gave you that inspiration? Because when you do something that's like when you're a little bit young and you're kind of pushed towards something, it's like for you to even have thought this is a possibility. Were they pushing you along?
Well, personally, my parents were actually going through a divorce at the time, and I'm one of 7 children, so it was a really, really difficult time to be at home. So that probably gave me a little push to leave home probably earlier than I would have. But also my dad, who's a full-time musician, my mom was stay-at-home full-time mom with 7 children. They both worked really, really hard, both outside and inside the home. And my dad, whilst he was a full-time musician, also renovated and built houses kind of on the side, which is what I ended up doing as well. And it's funny because had he not been a musician, had always wanted to be an architect, but he ended up being a very successful musician, so he stayed with it. So I suppose it's that kind of thing of like, it's the kind of the professional mainstream job or the arts. And for both Dad and I, the arts won, but we still ended up being involved in property in some way. So I suppose I got that from him.
Got it.
Yeah.
So he's a grafter. You're clearly you are a grafter. I know that to be true. What age are your daughters now?
They're 21 and 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are they like in that respect?
Well, Amelia hates the fact that I share the story of buying a house at 20 because she's almost 22, and she's like, don't be saying that to me, as if, it's not pressurized enough. We have a joke about it, it's not right that young people today don't have the same opportunities that I had, because firstly, there are not enough houses on the market. But even, when there are houses, they're overpriced. Rent is overpriced. The cost of living in Ireland is just outrageous, especially in the cities and in Dublin. And the earnings don't match. So they're not giving people a chance, So something's got to give, something has to change. But the girls, they're like, when I think about it, from 0 to 20 years of age, I moved 4 times with my parents, and yet, and then from 20 until now, I also moved 4 times myself, because whilst working full time in media, in broadcasting, in a Roadwatch, then RTE, then TV3, now back with RTE, I would renovate my homes on the side because it was always a hobby of mine. And that's what my dad did as well at the same time. So I think for my children's generation, for that generation, and I've seen it happen, it's the parents that have to help them, to get there. So there's a lot of pressure. And it's really unfair as well that young people are forced to live at home with their parents, to an age where they shouldn't have to. It's not fair on them, and it's not fair on the parents either,
Yeah, yeah. Tell me more about renovating these homes, because, to do 4 of them, that's a lot of learning along the way, and a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
I'm curious, purely from a financial point of view, any tips for people? What are the biggest money drains that could be avoided?
Well, my dad always said that there were 3 things that were important when you were buying a property, and that's location, location, location. We've all heard that. So when I bought my first house, it was the tiniest little cottage. It was 670 square foot, the entire cottage, but it was on Brighton Road on Foxrock, so the location was amazing. So when I did it up, I sold it a couple of years later, but doubled what I'd paid for it, even with the renovation. So I would just say to people, and I did that then with the next few houses too. Never ever bought a house, Katie, to flip it. They were always my homes. That's just the way it worked, I ended up, selling them and selling them at the right time, and then making money that way. So I would always say to people, only buy in a place that you will be happy to live in for the rest of your life, in case you have to. So location is always the most important thing. And then don't be afraid to do a lot of it yourself. The last house that I bought with my husband, Peter, when we were just married, Amelia was in my tummy. And so I was pregnant on my first child. And it's the house that we're in now, which we absolutely love, but it was in 8 flats. And we spent every single penny we had buying that house and had very little left over to do it up. So we just did it up over time and did a lot of it ourselves, you know, and favours from friends and family and things like that. And we furnished it with just leftover furniture that anybody had to give away.
Yeah.
And then over the years, you know, swapped that out or whatever. So like I remember doing Nixers on the side because I was working in TV3 full time at that time. And I do Nixers at the weekend. So present other TV shows or radio or host events or whatever. And even though I had a small baby at home, but I would do a Nixer so I would have that bonus money. So that would be able to maybe do another bathroom or, you know, move on to another floor of the house to do. So I would say to people, just don't be afraid to you know, get your hands dirty.
Yes.
And do a lot of the work yourself, you know. And I'm wondering, you asked me there about the girls, I'm wondering, you know, would they, you know, that generation, would they be willing to get their hands dirty like I did? I hope so, because I've definitely instilled a good work ethic in both of them. They both have always had part-time jobs from a very young age. But I always say, you know, I had to work hard because I'm very expensive. I'm very high maintenance and I wanted to marry for love. Yeah. So therefore I knew I was going to have to maintain myself. Yeah. And that's always been my motivation. You know, I like really nice things. I like really nice holidays. Now I like to give the girls, you know, nice memories and experiences. And I also want to be able to give them opportunities, you know, now for themselves and for the future. So, you know, you have to work to be able to maintain all of that.
Yes. Let's get into money mindset. I'm curious about you. Are you a spender or a saver?
Definitely a spender.
Okay.
Yes. And Peter would be the same. And I don't really worry about money. I worry enough to know that, you know, I will have the bills paid. But anything after that, you know, I'm, again, just all about having memories and experiences. When myself and Peter met first in the early stages of our relationship, a very good friend of ours told us a story about, you know, her own mom and dad, and they'd worked really hard, had a family business, and they were always saving for their retirement to do that trip around the world or whatever. And they worked every hour that God sent them. And then 6 months after they both retired, she got Alzheimer's. And it was one of the really quick Alzheimer's. So within 6 months, she didn't know any of her family. And I remember him saying to us, get your living in now.
Yeah.
And myself and Peter have always lived by that. We've made Mr. and Mrs. Hannah very proud.
Yes.
As a result, we've very little savings, but we've had amazing experiences. And I know, Katie, that I will always work because I'm not precious, you know. Whatever it takes, I will do that job, you know, to pay the bills and to make sure that we're, you know, we all have a roof over our heads. So I don't worry in that way. And in fact, sometimes Peter kind of teases me and gets slightly cross because he'll say, you know, I will actually almost spend the money before I've earned it because it actually motivates me to work harder. Yeah. You know, because I'm like, it's okay. I'll have that covered. You know, keep the faith.
Nice. But it's so true. And I love that. I just love that philosophy because it's not just the fact that like you're only going to have a certain amount of energy throughout your life and, you know, and vitality, because that's going to, you know, that does naturally get a little bit, you know.
It does.
You have less of it when you get older.
Very good point.
But just letting the good times roll when the good times are here, because, you know, we all go through bad times during every decade. Yeah. So sometimes when it just feels like you've got like a succession of green lights, that's the time I'd be like, let's go, let's do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember people saying to me at the time when I left Expose, because they were saying, you know, it's the dream job, you know, it's the best job in the world. And I knew it was one of the best jobs in the world and I absolutely loved it. But I wasn't getting to see, you know, my own babies, and that's always been much more important to me. Yeah. Family and being a mom was just you know, it was always going to happen to me, whatever way it happened. I was always going to be a mom because I've always been very maternal. And then I just wasn't getting to see the girls because of the day job. So when I left to spend more time with them, I remember, you know, my pals in work saying, oh my God, are you mad? And it was in a recession as well. You know, why? Like, how can you? And you know, you're not afraid. And say if you'd never get back into TV again, you know, if you leave your own show. And my answer all the time was, you know, I will always work. I'll always be able to do something, you know. So I wasn't afraid. The one thing that I was afraid of was not spending time with my babies because I would never get that back. And that I would definitely have regretted for the rest of my life. Whereas jobs come and go, you know, and careers change. Because I left, I got opportunities that I never would have had before. I tried out things that I never would have tried before. So I've absolutely no regrets. And I've an abundance of time in comparison to what I had. And I've still managed to pay my bills and pay for expensive Lorraine at times.
Yeah.
High maintenance me.
Yeah. I mean, and then somebody actually, funny enough, that I interviewed this week mentioned about time as well, and like described it as time freedom. And it is, you know, it's definitely something that shouldn't be squandered either, you know, because like you're saying, you'll never get it back.
No, life's too short.
Yeah. Yes. What was your first job?
My gosh, I had so many part-time jobs, Katie, all through school. So from packing bags in supermarkets to washing hair and hairdressers, working in all sorts of retail, toy shops, clothes shops, sweet shops. What was my hardest job, did you say? Or
Your first?
Oh, my first. Yeah. Well, that would have been my first, I suppose. Then my first real job would have been a road watch because I was 18.
Sure.
So, because I'd only done a year in college. So that was my first job. But as I say, at the weekends, and I'd work in the AA Rescue Centre answering rescue calls from all over the country. And then I also worked in the training centre in RTE for directors and producers when they were training to be directors and producers. Obviously, they needed presenters and I needed on-camera experience. So I put myself forward and I didn't get paid. I used to just go in at the weekends and literally practice reading an auto cue while somebody practiced being a director and a producer. So it was a win-win for all of us. We were all getting experience. So yeah, broadcasting would have been my first job. Yeah.
Okay, got it. And then any worse jobs? I know that was your first, but in terms of like, you know, there's kind of like pocket money gigs. Was there anything on the way up?
Yeah, I remember working for a free newspaper in Dublin. I think it was called the Fitzwilliam Post. It's going back a long way. And I had the double spread on the inside. And I was a salesperson basically. So I had to try
cold calling.
Oh my gosh, small ads. I'll never forget it. That was my worst job, I think.
But you know what? Probably your best job, because I think if you can pick up the phone.
I was so bad at it.
But if you can get one sale on the phone with a stranger, you are.
I was so bad at it, but I actually got on so well with the editor at the time. He was such a nice man that, and I kept saying to him, you know, I want to write and I want to do interviews and whatever. So I remember he sent me to my first interview and it ended up being a huge part of my career. So it just shows you how, you take a job to make money, to earn money. Don't be afraid to work because it does open doors into other things. And it was to go to a press conference to be one of probably 20 or 30 journalists. And I wasn't even really a journalist because I was only in college. I hadn't qualified. And I got to interview Kenny Rogers.
No way.
And I love Kenny Rogers to this day. And I was just this little young one when I think about it. I was probably about 17, 18 and petrified to ask a question. And all the journalists were asking, you know, various questions. And at the end then, I remember he kind of looked at me and said, okay, one more question. And I went to put my hand up to answer it. And Maxie from Maxie, Dick and Twink, who I don't remember because they were before my time, but I remember Maxie and love her. She was a broadcaster on the radio at the time for RTE and up until not that long ago. Amazing, beautiful person, but but she got in ahead of me. And he obviously saw the disappointment in my face. She was in front of me. She didn't realise that I put my hand up. But then he said, and you? So he gave me an opportunity to ask my question. And I wrote out the whole interview based on everybody else's questions and answers, because I'd only gotten one.
Yes.
So that would have been like one paragraph. And then from that then ended up getting other gigs writing. Yeah. So
Can you remember what the question was?
Can't remember. I wish I did.
Yeah.
Can't remember. I wouldn't say it was very good.
Yeah, but great access.
I'd say all the
to
good
get.
ones had been asked at that stage.
Yeah. So tell me about, out of all the people in your life, who would you say is the best with money and who would you say is the worst?
I'm probably the best and the worst.
Okay.
Yeah, because I spend it. It's there to be spent.
Yeah.
And I get it right most of the time because, it's always been, something that has benefited the family or, a nice experience or something. Peter would be definitely more frugal, thank goodness, because one of us needs to be. And occasionally I'd buy something and he'd say that was ridiculous now. That was just such a waste of money.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10 it turns around and I go, now there you go. See?
Robot hoovers are fantastic.
Yeah. And I say, now you don't regret that, do you?
Yeah.
So I would be both. But I am glad that Peter is more frugal because it just, I would probably be a little bit too spendy. And I also love gifting. I love, buying things. I love giving things to people that they really want or know they love or they need. Like I actually get such a buzz out of that. So, which makes me sound like I'm trying to be Mother Teresa. I'm not. It's actually just, I love doing that. I love seeing the face of somebody that you got it right. And my friends always say that, like I would start buying Christmas presents in February, March. Now, I do have a big family. I've got 5 sisters and a brother, and we've 20 grandchildren on my side, and then we've 8 on Peter's side, and then my 2. So there's a lot to buy for. But when I see something, I go, oh no, that's definitely Tori, or oh gosh, Danny would love that, or So that's what I do. Yeah.
What's your greatest extravagance?
It's probably our house. So it's the one thing that we spent most money on and will be paying for a long time to come. But also the best investment at the same time, And as I say, we bought it in 8 flats and turned it back into a house. It was my 4th renovation, but probably the easiest renovation I ever did, Katie, because it's an old house. So I always say it had its bone structure. All we had to do was bring it back to its original. So it was the easiest renovation to do in that way. And thankfully, the man who had the house before us, who had it in 8 flats, was a carpenter himself, and he saved all the cornicings and saved all the fireplaces, and ceilings were hidden behind false ceilings, and so we were very lucky in that way.
Nice.
We had to do a bit of filler in of cornicings and stuff like that because there were 8 kitchenettes and 8 shower rooms with fake walls, partition walls, so to pull them all back out. It's been a labour of love.
Yes,
but definitely love being more than labour. Yeah.
So along with being, I'm not going to say a property developer, but you kind of flirt. You flirt with it.
Yeah.
But along with being a broadcaster, you're also an entrepreneur, and you have your self-tan range, Decadence.
Yes, thank you.
I'm curious about some of the financial lessons you've learned from that. 'Cause, I mean, most startup entrepreneurs will tell you, in the first year or two, they look back at some of the things they did, and there's regret and a lot of, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
Anything that stands out for you?
Well, I haven't had a huge amount of money to invest in it. And I'm a huge believer that you need to spend money to make money, because you need to promote something. Otherwise, nobody knows it's there. And I should be actually putting a bit more time into it. And there are times when I can give it a bit more time, and it definitely shows in sales. There's 2 reasons probably why I don't put enough time into it. And thankfully it's starting to pick up, but it's been a very slow burn for that reason, because I just didn't have a huge amount of money to invest in that. So the reason it's been slow is, 1, I get a little bit embarrassed kind of pushing my own stuff. Like you just feel a bit, it's a bit when you're trying to promote your own thing, whereas I can do it for free for lots of other Irish brands, that I want to promote, and young Irish designers and things like that, because it's easier to do it for someone else. I think if I put a bit more of my time into it, and if I start investing a little bit more money and time into it, it'll probably grow even quicker. But it has been a slow burn. And in the last 6 months, we've seen a huge increase, which has been lovely. So I think that's more about people buying it and liking it and coming back for more. And then word of mouth is huge in Ireland. As we know, people believe other people's experiences. So I've had to do it that way. If I had more money to invest in it, would I? Absolutely, 100%. Because I'm also qualified in PR. So when I was in an AA Road Watch for 7 years, I went back to college at night, and so I'm PRII, got the letters after my name, but I've never used them. I've never practiced PR. I've never worked in PR, but yet I use it probably every day of my life without even realising, as part of what I do in my job and whatever. So yeah, I would like to have a little bit more investment, because I have other ideas within the whole kind of beauty and skincare area, because it's an area that I've been working in, for 30 years. And I'm also a bit of a beauty product junkie. Like I'm actually fascinated with it, and I love trying new things. So I would say to people, if you can get a backer, and if you can take less risk yourself, then great. I would do that. But you do need to promote. Online has been fantastic. We're very lucky now that we have, platforms like I have my channels with my Lorraine Keane Official on Instagram and Facebook. And that's been hugely helpful, because, you can do that for very little investment. And you can also you can target demographics and see exactly who's picking up on it and who you're reaching. It's been very difficult, almost impossible to do that with traditional media, with TV and radio, advertising and marketing. So, the online has been hugely helpful. It gives people more opportunities.
Yeah. And you must have got a lot of advice from other beauty brand owners, and not even just beauty, other small brand owners. I'm curious, did any business advice?
Well, I saw Trini Woodall, who's just an amazing woman who started off her brand from zero, and that was during COVID. And she's a broadcaster; that's her background. And I've met her many times, and she's a fantastic woman. And she basically, she's authentic. She's very real. So she would have been trying out loads of different brands during COVID and doing her videos, which she does very well because she's a broadcaster. So she's a really good communicator. And then she was getting feedback from people that follow her about what they liked and what they wanted and what they thought that was missing in the market. And that's what she kind of tapped into. And she developed her own range. And people can trust her because she is authentic, and I think that's hugely important. And that means an awful lot to me. Like I want to, like my Decadence by Lorraine Keane is a luxury product, which was hugely important to me because your skin is your largest organ in your body. And I wanted to make sure that whatever I was putting on my skin was good, that the ingredients were skin loving, and, the highest standard of DHA and all of that was hugely important to me. That costs money. I also wanted to make as much of it as I could in Ireland. That's also, and then sustainable obviously as well. So all those things cost a little bit more. But, I think if you are true and real and authentic, and you're investing in something for all the right reasons, that speaks for itself. And I think that's when you get the longevity. Then you get the customers coming back. And I mean, Trini's business now in about 5 years is worth, I don't know, something like 30-something million.
Wild.
Isn't it wild? Yeah. And again, that's hard work.
Yeah.
She did that herself. I know she had an investor there for a while, that I think, was her partner. And I'd say that was handy to have an investor, to certainly to start off. But she put a lot of hard work into it. And they're really good products. So, that's why they're still around. You can pump money into anything, Katie, and, you can be all bells and whistles and shout it from the rooftops with, lights and cameras, and lots of people will buy it because it's been pushed in their face and they want to try it. Will they come back for it if it's not good? No, they won't. So it's been a total waste of money.
Yes. Yeah. Cream rises.
Yeah.
On that note, what about you and expensive beauty? Like, what do you like? What do you actually splurge on from a beauty point of view? Like, what?
Yeah. So I would definitely look at the ingredients of products, and they don't have to be super duper expensive. One of the first products I ever used, and I buy it now for the girls, is La Roche-Posay, and it's an over-the-counter chemist product that is not expensive. It's accessible to most people. And I still use quite a lot of those products. I would love to, I've put it out there so many times, so this isn't going to change anything. Because I would approach brands and products a lot that I love, that I work with, or that I use, and that I want to work with. I'd approach them myself. I don't wait for people to come to me. I'd be like, I actually love your product and I would love to work with you. Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they don't get back to you at all. La Roche-Posay never got back to me.
Okay.
I've been asking them for about 10 years.
Yeah.
But they don't have faces,
yeah.
Where a lot of brands have a face for whatever. They don't. But so that'd be a product that's, as I say, accessible to most, that I think is really good. But I would look at the ingredients. So I think as we age, we have to change the products that we use. So hyaluronic acid is hugely important for hydration all through our lives, and particularly after 40. And then because I get hormonal breakouts, which is one of the symptoms that I have with perimenopause, glycolic acid and a cleanser is really important. Another thing that I picked up over the years was the double cleanse. So you get a cheap kind of cleanser, an affordable cleanser, and then you do that as your first cleanse and you take off all the heavy makeup, and then you use a slightly more expensive cleanser as your second cleanse that might have glycolic acid in it, so it's a deeper into your pores kind of cleanse, and you use a tiny bit of that because it is more expensive, and you don't need to use much of it because it's your second cleanse. So you think, oh God, I'm now buying 2 products. It actually makes both products last longer, so it doesn't. So yeah, lots of little tips that I've picked up over the years. But when it comes to your skin, you should definitely invest in, skin loving ingredients. Watch what you're putting on your skin, read the back of everything, educate yourself. It's all there. All of the ingredients for every single product need to be printed on the back, and if they're sold online, in the kind of caption. So just be really, really careful, because it does make a difference, but you don't have to spend massive amount of money.
I like what you just said there about approaching La Roche-Posay. Like, did you get better at doing that as you got older, or was that always in you, that ability to just put yourself out there and think, if you don't ask, you don't get? Yeah,
like I remember when I started talking about perimenopause for the first time, and that was, over 10 years ago, nobody was talking about perimenopause or menopause. It was a taboo subject. It was like, it was something you were supposed to be embarrassed of or ashamed of as a woman for generations, forever before. Nobody spoke about it. And nobody spoke about it in the UK, even the US. So at the time, it was a really scary thing for me to do, especially in the line of work that I'm in, because, media tends to be a bit, ageist when it comes to women. And that stage of life was seen as, oh, you're old, you're decrepit, you're past it. Whereas I was in perimenopause at 38 and I did not feel any of the above, And I thought, if I don't talk about this, then there's going to be other people suffering in silence like I do. It affects your fertility in a huge way, which I didn't realise. And it's stuff that you can fix, but only if you know that you're going through it. And when I started going through it, because I was so young, I'm one of the very unfortunate 3% of women that will go through perimenopause in their late 30s. Normally it's closer to 45, if you're lucky, over 45. So I thought, I can't go on HRT at 38 because I could be on it for the next 20 years. And I wanted to, at the time I was doing an event called Keane on Style, and it was one of these fashion and beauty and hair and makeup and, shopping little pop-ups. And I went around the country with it, and I'd been doing it for a few years, and it was really successful and I loved doing it. And then I realised, actually, you know what, I need to introduce women's health into this, because that's a huge part of what we need to know and educate ourselves as women to be empowered and not be, feeling bad for minding ourselves. So I started introducing women's health into it, and it became kind of the focus of the events. Then that's the thing that women wanted more and more. And suddenly I had this panel of women that were coming with me to do these shows, an endocrinologist, somebody in nutrition and health, diet, somebody in exercising and somebody in well-being. So it got to the stage then where I wanted to be able to travel the country with a panel of experts to give us all of our options, not just HRT. So all of the options and the life stages, the 3 lifestyle changes that we need, regardless of whether we go down the medical route or the natural health route. And I asked Clean Marine to pay for that tour.
Yeah.
But only on the basis that I could cover everything, not just their supplement.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be just about that. I wanted to give women all their options with all the experts, and they did. So I'm now working with them 11 years.
Wow. And you made the first first move.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, they were looking for somebody anyway, because they were probably one of maybe 3 supplements on the market at the time for menopause, because nobody was talking about menopause at the time. But yeah, and I've been working with them ever since now. We have podcasts ourselves called Let's Talk Hormone Health. And it was the scariest thing I've probably ever done in my career, Katie, as a, kind of a risk. And it's probably one of the proudest things that I've ever done.
Well, you were first out of you really were an early adopter. I mean, that's not the right word to use, but you were definitely quite brave, because you're right. People weren't talking about it at all back then.
Even Davina was 5 years later in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And now we're all talking about it, and it's not a taboo anymore.
No.
I went out onto the streets a few weeks ago and to Vox Pop people, just to see after 10 years how far we've come. And I thought, when people see you with a microphone, when you Vox Pop, you probably know that in our business, they tend to cross the other side of the street anyway.
Yeah.
But they didn't. And when I told them what I wanted to talk about, they stayed and they chatted. And not only women, men as well. I was blown away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blown away. I thought I was going to be out there for 4 hours and be lucky to get maybe 5 or 6 people. I got tons and tons of content because people were just so happy to talk about it.
Yeah. So what do you like then when we come to things like money negotiations or uncomfortable conversations about money, or somebody owes you?
Really
okay, because I thought being good at
I
that,
wish.
you might be good at that.
Bad.
Okay.
I know, it's desperate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy to talk about it, but I'm just not good at asking for it. It's desperate. And it's something that I'm definitely getting better at, not because more practice, but just because I'm getting older and I care less. I still care, but I care less.
Yeah.
So I kind of go like, fuck it, what have I got to lose?
Yes.
And I've always said to my girls, a smile and good manners will get you through anything. And I think you can approach everything with that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
You don't have to be nasty or aggressive to get that story. When I was an entertainment correspondent, I found the more pleasant you are and the easier you are to work with, the more doors open, and just be kind, and it's karma. I think when you're a nice person, if you're good to people, if you give people opportunities, if you give people, a hand, a leg up or whatever, it comes back.
Yes.
Tenfold it comes back. I've seen it. That's been my life, my whole life. I'm definitely not the best broadcaster. My experience, yes, I've had lots. I don't really have that much formal training. I did 1 year in broadcasting and journalism. I have imposter syndrome. I've been winging it ever since. But I do think the one thing that has always stood by me is the fact that I'm not afraid of hard work. And I don't embarrass easily, I don't have pride. I don't have an ego, there are much more important jobs and people out there. There are people saving lives. Do you know what I mean? Let's not take ourselves too seriously. I don't believe in the whole celebrity thing. And, I do believe in just being kind and giving back, and then you do get it back.
Nice. And
Karma.
I totally agree. What about financial regrets. Do you have any?
A few silly purchases, I suppose, and usually just small ones.
No apartments in Bulgaria or?
No apartments in Bulgaria. Because again, that thing where location, I only ever bought homes. And even though I would think to myself, my first one was so small and I would think, well, that's probably not going to be my forever home. But if it was my forever home, would I be happy to live there forever? And yes, I would, because it was a lovely place to live. So yeah, I think, never buy anywhere that you wouldn't want to live in yourself. Yeah. Otherwise it's not a good investment, And, just, I suppose for me, all my life choices, personally and professionally, have been based on my heart, really, on my passion, more so even than my head, So, and I think for that reason, again, it all kind of falls into place eventually.
Yeah.
You have to keep the faith.
Well, that's it. They say, follow your passion, the money will follow.
Yeah. And I've said that to my girls. And it's funny because Amelia, who's the eldest, who's almost 22, she did that. So she's a great little actress, and they both did the Royal Irish Academy of Music exams right up to 8th grade when they were little. And that's real kind of old-fashioned, traditional speech and drama. So it's feis and it's public speaking. It's not show hands. Yeah. It's, the more kind of, I just wanted them not to have the imposter syndrome that their mother has had her whole life, because I only did 1 year of college and then thankfully got a lovely job, which snowballed for me in the industry. But she followed her passion, which is drama, and she's just finished her degree in TUD in drama performance. So that's amazing. But then Romy is a great little singer, and obviously her dad, my husband Peter, is a musician. My dad, so her granddad's a musician. There's always been music in both families. And she's a great little singer and a great little actress. And she just said, I can't, Mom, I can't. Like, I'm just afraid that if I go down the music route and it doesn't work out for me. She's a bit like me in the way that I need to have a job. Yeah. I need to be earning. I wouldn't be great, Katie, at the downtime in between, an acting gig and another acting gig. I have to keep busy. So Romy's the same, and she's also knows she's quite expensive like her mother. So and she knows she's like her mother, that she wants to, if she lucky to meet somebody in life, that it'll be for all the right reasons. Yes. So she's like, Mom, I just have to have a job that I know. So hopefully she's trying to get points for law. She's doing her leaving cert at the moment. So, and you know what? She'll always have the creative, and who knows what she'll end up doing. But she's right. She's probably seen her creative parents her whole life, Katie, and kind of going, do you know what? I think I need a bit more stability than that. Yeah. Because there have been times in our lives, and myself and Peter's lives, where, you kind of go, yikes, there's not much in the bank, and that gig better happen. And as I said to you have to keep the faith. And it's always managed to come through. And we've always done it ourselves. Yes. But because of that, Romy probably is going, I think I'll have something to fall back on just in case.
Yes. And would you have those kind of conversations in the family? Because I'm curious, some parents really want to shelter their kids from any money talk. No. And then you also hear experts saying that they should be exposed in an age-appropriate way. Yeah. So, we're in a tight month. Yeah. Like my parents, my mum and father came from very humble backgrounds. Dad Rathfarnham, Mum Ballyfermot. They both ended up living in Ballyfermot separately. As they were teenagers, they met in their late teens, and my dad's band was very successful. So although my mom's family were so poor, so there was never any waste in our family, we as a family had a very privileged upbringing. We were very comfortable because Dad's band was very successful and Mum worked really hard at home with all of us. But we were spoiled for sure, but we were never ruined because we always knew how hard they both worked to give us those opportunities, those holidays, those, lovely Christmases. And because of that, all of my siblings, we all have a really strong work ethic. And it's been the same for Amelia and Romy. They've been very, very lucky with their upbringing and the opportunities and their lovely holidays and all the rest. But
they know how hard their mum and dad work for it. And we've always made them work, both in the house, they have their chores, and outside the house, they've always had part-time jobs. Because I think it's not fair. It's very easy when you have a few extra bob. And I guess we probably didn't have that much extra. So, you know, it can be very easy, I'm sure, if you're very well off, very comfortable, to just give to them and not expect them to work for it. I see how that can happen, but it's not fair. You're not doing them any favours. Yeah. You know, you're turning beautiful little humans. They're all born beautiful. You're turning them into potential wasters. You know, you're not giving them the opportunity to be proud of themselves and get that feeling of achievement, you know. And we always appreciate things more if we've had to work for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just the way it goes.
And tell me this, from a money point of view, do you have any goals for yourself for the next 5 years?
Oh, to pay off the mortgage, wouldn't that be lovely?
Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh, but you know what? If we don't pay off the mortgage in 5 years because we've gone to Vietnam or we've visited Peter's brother in Australia, then so be it. You know, I'd much rather do those things. I would just like to make sure that the things that we can't buy, which are health and each other, that they remain, you know? So I was asked recently, you know, what are your favourite things to spend money on? And they are, you know, experiences or going out for dinner, you know, travel, whatever. And the things that I love most in the world actually don't cost a penny, you know, and they're, you know, walking my furry babies on the seafront or throw myself into the freezing cold Irish Sea, you know, for mental health benefits as much as anything else, you know, and travelling or having dinner with Peter and the girls in our own home or with my siblings or with Peter's siblings. You know, it's all those things. And, you know, I remember Romy asking me a question when she was about 6, Katie, and I still say it to her. She might even have been a little bit younger, and it was just so gorgeous, and it'll always stick with me. And she was asking me about, there were people that she knew, friends that she had, and the parents were very well off. They were wealthy. And she said to me, she was saying something about them or their house or whatever, I don't know what it was. And she said, you know, are they rich, Mom? And I said, I didn't know how to answer. I was like, because then she'd probably say it to them as well. My mum said you're rich. So I said, they're very comfortable, Romy. You know, they're very lucky. They work very hard. They're very comfortable. And she said, oh, okay, are we rich? And I said, well, we're very comfortable too. Maybe not as comfortable, but like we're really comfortable. So, because we work really hard too. And then she thought about it for a while and she said, I think we're rich in happiness.
Stop.
I actually get goose pimples every time I tell that story.
Wow.
I know.
The amounts of babes.
And I was like, we are Rome's, we are rich in happiness.
That is beautiful. I'm going to leave it on that beautiful note. That's so nice.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you so much for coming in. I love that story.
Thank you.
Super. I am Katie Byrne, and today's episode of Money Talks was produced and researched by Dave Hanratty, recorded by John Smith with sound design by Mary Carroll. If you like Money Talks, please give us a like and don't forget to follow.